Okay, thank you for watching the SMB Forex and Futures Weekly Analysis. My name is Mark Principato. So in today's segment, I'm going to be covering the usual pairs, the S&P 500, CFD, the Euro dollar, pound dollar, and Aussie dollar. All right, to get a broader sense of what the market can do over the following week. So we're going to be looking at the bigger picture, and here the first thing I'm going to put up here is the S&P 500, because that's our broad view of the stock market, and it can give us clues sometimes. Let's take a look here at the 4-hour chart. Now, on this thing, as I've been talking about for a couple of weeks now, this thing really has no indication that it wants to go lower just yet. When we zoom out, we can see that we are approaching the all-time high, which is less than 10 points away. Now on Friday, we were fooling around maybe just a couple of points below this number, which means, it's barely moved. And it really needs something to push it along here. We're approaching this high, which means that people are going to be hesitant up here. Probably sellers are going to be coming out, trying to sell this thing, all that kind of stuff. But we have to remember that the momentum is still showing higher highs and higher lows. Now this thing may sell off hard if it can get a catalyst behind it. Now we do have Bernanke speaking on Thursday. So that's a good excuse for this thing to consolidate, be really tight and nasty during the week. And this guy opens his mouth, and next thing you know, we have a big sell-off again. I mean, that's all possible. It's unpredictable, though. We cannot predict how the market's going to react to the way this guy speaks. So we'll have to see. There could be some greater volatility before that. But as we get closer to that, the market, I suspect, is going to get quieter. It is summertime. Volume is generally lighter. So these are all things we have to keep in mind. This momentum is upward. Now, with that being said, the first thing I look for are the levels. What levels are we interested in here? What can we do with this on the bigger picture? Well, the first bigger picture level that I would say is around that 1650 level. You get the whole number, you have an old resistance, and that would be a good place to look for a trick in those 1640s, right in this area here. That would be good for intraday, longs, all right? Other than that, there's really not much to work with because, you have to wait till 1600. It's a long ways from here. So you need some sort of pullback, and these ones, you get these little tiny pullbacks. They're too shallow for any broader picture type of trade. You don't want to be taking any type of swing trades based on these tiny little structures up in here. That's very, very risky. All right. So if we don't get the pullback during the week, then there's really nothing to do on this thing in the bigger picture. That doesn't mean there won't be opportunities on the smaller picture. There can be plenty of those depending on how we react to these little minor levels in here. But you have to know what you're doing with that, and you have to be able to validate those, and you have to have the right expectations. If you don't, you can really get into big problems. If you start getting involved up in here, and this, sellers really kick in and this thing really starts to sell off. So just a few things to keep in mind. Bigger picture, not a good place for longs. And as far as shorts, I just don't think it's ready yet. All right. You're better off, if you're looking for a bigger picture short, instead of trying to short that initial peak, you're better off waiting for some sort of secondary reaction. And you can make the argument and you can say to me, well, this is a secondary peak relative to this one. Yes, it is. But relative to its own swing, it's initial. It's a primary peak. So I would wait until you get some other structure in there that indicates at least some more weakness before just jumping into something like that short. All right. At least take out some sort of supports and retest the resistance. That's really all I have to say about the S&P. Not much else to say about it. You have one pretty big cycle over here. All right, let's just compare this to the Dow real quick to see if it tells us anything different. The Dow has a little bit more of a consolidation in here. Notice the symmetry in here? And it's much closer to the vicinity It's within the vicinity of these prior highs back in here. So this is actually showing a little bit more weakness that's in the S&P, slightly, not by much though. So this would be a good indicator as far as if it closes below this range support at 15,389. If it can do stuff like that, that means probably the S&P is going to be getting weaker. All right, especially if you get a close below 15,250 with conviction. Otherwise, use this as your gauge for longs, intraday and bigger picture. This would be the key level here on the Dow. We close below that, then we have confirmed momentum to the bear side. Using this type of analysis, is it going to get you in at tops and bottoms? No. The idea is to position yourself on the side of the dominant momentum. Here's the euro dollar on the 4-hour chart. And it's interesting because after this massive move we had in the previous week, we've been consolidating that move. We are now currently sitting at the support of that move. This happens to be a 382 retracement of this move, this area here. So with this, I would be watching right now for the trick. I would be watching to confirm with volume analysis. I would be watching candlestick patterns and smaller time frames. I would be watching this 30 even area very carefully. It's a whole number, and on top of being a whole number, you have a possible pattern forming here. All right, so you just need to validate this. This is a possible long. All right, very possible. The targets for that could be up in the 3092 area, up into the 31s. So you want to keep an eye on this. And if it goes beyond that, if it breaks above this range with some kind of conviction, it may keep going and retest the 32s. At this moment, we don't have anything like that. We need the catalyst. We have that news coming out in just a few minutes here. We'll see how this thing reacts to that news. If this thing closes below with some conviction, which is possible on this news, we start closing below, we get some bearish momentum pushing lower, you want to be watching the psychological support around the 618 of this here, okay? Which would be around the 2930 area. That may be the next place to look for some type of consolidation over some time. Otherwise, if it pushes through and starts pushing through these numbers without any effort, if it's just like very easy, then you want to step aside, and eventually when you get a one-leg retracement or something with no higher lows in it, you can try maybe looking for a short on a scalping basis. But bigger picture-wise, this is a key level right here, and this may present an opportunity to take a position. You just need to be able to validate that, and it needs just a little bit more time, in my opinion, because you can do this on a 15-minute chart. All right, I'm not going to go into the details on that for this recording. That's for the chat room only. All right, so I like the euro long, and I like this level. We'll see what happens with that. So on the pound, it's a similar situation to the euro. I mean, we're reacting to the dollar, really. So the pound had this bearish momentum. It failed to make the lower low here, right? It barely made that lower low. Look at the type of candles. This was that massive squeeze that we saw in the euro as well. And this one, the consolidation here is not as nice as the euro, right? The euro has a pretty clear consolidation. This one has a failed high, trying to pull back, has a lower high, attempted to make the lower low, but look what's happening now. Right, we just had this news come out, and these markets are attempting to squeeze. We'll see if they can sustain that. But that's what's going on right now. If we measure this movement, just like the euro, we're fooling around off of a 382, just like the euro. So this area, if you can validate, especially with your volume analysis, if you have your net reversal in there, you have your value area in there, and it starts to do stuff like this, any retest of that value area is going to be important. But this, again, these are very important areas of interest on the bigger picture. It's happening as I'm doing this recording. So if you're not in this thing now, or you're not sure when to get in, you still have some time. You want to wait because You can refine this on a smaller time frame, which I'm not going to include here on the recording. But this is definitely an area that you want to pay very close attention to and try to measure your risks from. Where this can go, depending on how we close, because what you want to see on the next 4-hour close is a bullish close. This thing should start taking out highs over the rest of the day. And it should be attempting to reach this previous swing high, maybe over the next day. That's what you want to see. If instead it closes weak and you start getting these nasty bearish closes, then don't insist on looking for longs, because that's not what it should be doing after this type of structure. It should be going higher, not lower. So if it goes lower, that means that long scenario is out the window. If you're in at that point, you want to get out, take the loss, whatever you have to do, because your next support is going to be the swing low. And that's the area you're going to want to wait for as far as your next trade on the bigger picture. Otherwise, you're in this area now. So you have to, it's moving quickly, so you have to validate or do what you have to do. Like I said, targets for this, if this thing can sustain itself and keep going, your initial target is around that 52.20s area. 52.20s, that recent swing high. All right? And that would also, if it made it up there, that would confirm this is a higher low. That would be a higher high. And that would also confirm a broader picture momentum change, which means if it can do all that, then you really want to hold off on shorts from that point. All right? So that's the perspective of the pound from the long side. On the short side, the only levels you want to consider, and that would be for only smaller picture type trading, would be anything above the 52.20 area. You can do one of those max fake things in there if you can validate. Otherwise, not a good idea, because like I said, if it makes it up there, this would be confirmed as a higher low, and now you'd be fighting this momentum. If you're going to fight momentum, you do not want to do it on the bigger picture. All right. You may be reaching for the segment close at the 53 area, and that's where you may see some additional resistance. Maybe that's where some structure will come in, which can open some smaller time frame shorts. Otherwise, if you have a higher low here and it starts pushing those highs, you can only expect it. It's only reasonable to expect a higher high unless the market does otherwise. All right. Again, Bernanke is going to come out in a few days, and whatever he says is either going to reinforce this structure or completely throw it out the window. It's a gamble, right? We can't predict how the market's going to react to what he says. We can only look at the structures we have right now and work with them until they change and give us another idea. Here's the Aussie dollar on the 4-hour chart. And like I've been talking a lot about this, about how it's generally weak. And you can see that over weeks, lower highs and lower lows, is trying to stabilize in here. And I was saying, as it was attempting to stabilize, it needs time to really prove itself. This is hardly enough time relative to this length of time. Spent a lot of time going lower. This is hardly enough time, right? You need something relative, something to say, hey, proportionately, it's spending enough time to prove that it's stabilizing. It's starting to do that. But I think it needs another week or two, to be honest. So what happened here? Well, we made a new low for the year or whatever, a 2-year low. We basically tested that area, and we're attempting to pop up off of it. See that? Again, not exactly the best situation for longs because of the general momentum of this thing. If you want to look for day trading type of stuff, okay, that's one thing. But swing trading, I would stay away. Let this thing stabilize. Let this thing fail to make lows. Let it create a range, and let it spend some time doing that. I have to keep repeating myself with this Aussie dollar, because you do not want to get involved in this thing and then start getting all beat up because it just insists on going lower. Every time there's some kind of announcement from Bernanke, or every time there's some kind of volatility, this thing just goes lower. So it's very difficult to short here because of the lows. You're messing around with this whole number area, very psychological area here. Very difficult to stay short. Imagine these guys who shorted it here. They had to sit through all this pain, and it's just too difficult, in my opinion. So If you really want to look for a short, you need to test at least a range high, at least 93, right? At least look for that if you want to get involved short and hold it for a day trade or possibly a little bit longer. That's what I would do if I was going to get involved with this thing. I personally don't like this thing. I don't like what it's doing, and I don't like generally where it's trading, so I'm just staying away from it. But if you really want to short it, I would wait till that level. At least you have a reference point, a whole number, and a good place to look for shorts, and at least it can test the middle of the range if it's not going to go lower. If you get a short off of that level up in there and it goes lower, great, you're in a great position. Otherwise, at least you have some profit potential. And if you're wrong and it starts going higher, you can get out right away and take a smaller loss, because it shouldn't go much higher if it's weak. It should not take out these highs and stay above them, okay? If it starts to do that, that means it's stabilizing and you do not want to be short anymore. So I think that's why that price offers the better scenario as opposed to shorting it, like especially at a level like this where it is right now, okay? That goes for the same for shorting new lows. As far as buying, again, I think it needs a lot more time to stabilize. Wait, let this thing spend some more time. And if you see something intraday, that's a different story. Like I said, you have to be able to validate that and you can do your day trade. Otherwise, I don't think this is the best choice for trading instruments right now. You're probably better off looking at another major or, just something completely different. Okay, so that's all we have for this week's SMB Forex and Futures analysis session. My name is Mark Principato, and I will see you next week. Thanks for watching.